Welcome to another episode coming at you from chooseyourrelationships.com, author of Love Can't Wait, which can be found on Amazon.com. So today I have a special guest. He's a human behaviorist, relationship coach since August of 2012. His approach to relationship is simple. Tend to your most important relationships daily. Make authentic communication between the two of you the most important thing, and do it daily. Speak your truth, even if it terrifies you. Break the monotony of insidious patterns by doing something out of the box and extraordinary, and do it regularly. Make sure your relationship is the adventure of your lifetime, and make sure it surprises you. Relationships are like a garden. If you tend to them with care, they grow into beautiful examples of vibrancy and health. If they get neglected, they eventually get choked by weeds and die on the vine, needing to be ripped out and started all over again from scratch. My special guest today is Etheridge. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thanks for having me on.
So where are you from originally?
I was born in Roanoke, Virginia. So I'm a southern boy by roots, but I did not live there for very long. And then when I was 1, we went to Binghamton, New York until I was 3. And then we landed in New Mexico when I was 3 till 18. So I kind of was raised in New Mexico, Albuquerque.
Oh.
So very, very, very different from Binghamton, New York. And then I've been all over the place. I've lived in California and Colorado and Arizona and Spain and Maui. So I've been everywhere.
Oh, so you well traveled.
Yeah. Love me some travel.
So how did you become a human behaviorist? Well, what is that exactly anyway?
Well, a human behaviorist, I work with perceptions. And so what we realize is that if I can change your thinking and I can change your story on something, which changes your thinking, it'll change your behavior. So I'm actually looking for behavioral change. When you have behavioral change, you're actually you can see that whatever we worked on has really changed because it's actually being exhibited in your behavior through action. And so we know that that's the most powerful sort of form of transformations. We can actually see you engaging in a wanted behavior by learning about an unwanted behavior.
How did you even know that it was such a thing? Because I didn't know.
Right. Well, so my career was actually developed by my challenges in life. I kind of grew up as in sort of an alcoholic family. I grew up in a very traditional household where dad was the authority figure and he's very authoritarian. We lived by his rules. We lived under his roof. And basically we sort of organized ourselves around dad. So we didn't really get to think a lot about myself. I didn't get to think about what I wanted to do and who I was. And so therefore I didn't have much of a relationship to myself and to others. And so that was my sort of journey in life, is actually who am I and how do I tick? And what do I want out of life are two of the most important things out of the struggles that I came from. And so that's really what I teach people through human behaviors. Who are you? What do you value most? What makes you tick and how do you get it? And then let's remove all the obstacles in your way so that you can actually create the life that you want and create where you want to go. And so my career came out of directly from my struggles and my pains and challenges, sort of making lemonade out of lemons, so to speak.
So why did you choose to focus on relationships specifically?
We're all shaped by relationships. I mean,
Yep.
you are shaped by every single relationship you've ever been in, whether they're good or bad, or you wanted to be in that relationship or you didn't. It shaped what you cared about. It shaped what you want to support. It shaped what you actually want to go away from or what challenges you. And so I relationships are interesting to me too, because everyone's got their own unique story, right? And they've got their own unique path. And they've done it through relationship, unless you're a monk in a cave, like monk in a cave sitting in a, right? And still you have relationship to yourself. So when I talk about relationships, I talk about working on relationship to self. So if you come into me, you're working on your own internal perceptions of yourself, relationship to other, whether it be a partner, a romantic partner, a boss, family member, whatever, or relationships to the world at large. An example of that is if a person comes into me with social anxiety, they are having a struggle navigating the world at large. Like, what's this party going to be like? How many people are there? Am I going to be able to handle myself? I might have a panic attack, right? So the world at large, they're struggling with. So I work with on all three levels with people, but I find relationships to be the most interesting.
So you get to the root cause of the problems that people might have.
Yep.
Right?
And people are really brilliant at knowing what they're struggling with. And so I don't go into story. I'm not going to go deeply into your story about how something happens. If you come into me with social anxiety, we're going to go to memories where you've experienced social anxiety, and then I'm going to show you how to rewrite them. And so I defrag your hard drive and rewrite your hard drive depending on basically what you want to tell yourself. If you learn deeply from social anxiety, you've learned from how it served you, what you learned from it, what skills it brought you, and what insights it brought you. You do that enough, and all of a sudden you're like, social anxiety is not a problem anymore. It's kind of like my teacher.
So do you work with groups like corporate companies?
I do. I do work. I work with CEOs, and sometimes I work with exec teams, depending if the CEO needs it. I'm also a value systems expert, so I determine each person's unique set of values. And a CEO, we need to know what their value system is, because it's their value system that's driving the company. It's their value system that's driving the vision and the mission of the company. And so I need to make sure that the vision and the mission of the company are what the CEO, it reflects the CEO's values. So first thing I do. And then we make sure that the exec team is aligned to the mission and the vision, and aligned to the CEO's values, so they can actually work like a well-oiled machine.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. So that brings me to my next question. How do you know if two people are a good match, that they could coexist with very little friction?
So I don't ever want to give the fantasy that you're gonna have very little friction in a relationship, because
Gonna be some.
You're gonna meet someone's shadow side that doesn't show up right in the beginning of the relationship. But I will say that I use value systems a lot to determine that. So let's say you have your unique set of things that you care about and that you love to talk about, that you love to drive forward, that you're really attempting to manifest in this world, right? You have your set. Anyone that you meet is going to have their set of values. So ever seen two circles, and they're sort of like, they overlap and they create like a Venn diagram, right? So two value systems that come together, wherever they overlap is where you're going to get each other. It's where you care about what they care about. It's your communication is way more fluid. You get excited to see them for that overlap. Maybe it's stamp collecting, or this particular sports team, or what they do for a living you just love, and you can talk about it for hours. To the degree of the overlap, if there's a greater overlap, you're going to have more of a fluid relationship with that person. It's just going to inherently be there. But for every single relationship where there's an overlap, there's a parts where they don't overlap. And where they don't overlap is where you don't get each other. You struggle in communication. You're most likely going to project onto them because you don't understand them in that area. And you will overvalue your value system and project your value system onto them. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And so you're going to get into a higher level of fights where you actually don't overlap. And so any couples that do work with me, I literally want to see their value system first. I want to have a deep dive in your values, and I want to see what is organically actually working. Why are you together? And then I can really clearly see what's not working too. They're going to tell me their fights, and I can go, see, this is where they don't overlap. This is where you guys are not getting each other. You want him to be more like you, and he wants you to be more like him. But the problem is with values is you are loyal to your values, and you're not loyal to your partners. And that's really hard for couples to hear.
Oh yeah, man.
Really hard, but that's just the facts. Is everyone is loyal to their value system, and we want you to be in our value system because it makes me comfortable. But if you don't want to be in my value system because you're loyal to yours, we either are going to have a conflict that we can't overcome, or we have to find the gray zone between the two, or we have to create a new overlap.
Yeah.
So that's my job, is to create as much overlap in your values as possible so you have the most fulfillment. And how do you communicate around the things that you just don't see eye to eye in?
Yeah, man. I think a lot of people can't get past the problems that they have, and they just don't know what to do, and they just give up.
If you perceive more pain than pleasure in your overall relationship, you'll start to move away from it.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And that happens over time. And so that's why I say the things that you just read off, that what I wrote down is, if you can stay in communication, if you make that the number one thing of your relationship, and you learn how to speak to each other even when you're fighting.
Yeah.
Stay in communication, you can work anything out. But if you don't stay in communication, that's when things start to break down.
Yeah, it's over. Because people shut down when they start talking no more.
Well, you become enemies.
And then one person start doing something else, their own thing.
Mm-hmm.
And the other person don't know what's going on.
Yep.
And it just collapsed.
And it's because they stopped working on it, and on some level there's a mirror, and both are perceiving more of a drawback in being together. So it breaks. That's why we have a 51% divorce rate in this country.
Yeah.
Right. They just couldn't see eye to eye, and they couldn't get their values to overlap enough in the relationship. So whenever you're entering into a new relationship, you really want to have a lot of overlap. You really want to be like, oh my God, he loves this band, and we love this food, and he loves to travel. And you want as many of those things to overlap as possible, because it just from the beginning lubricates the relationship. It doesn't mean though that there's not going to be struggles, or there's not going to be a shadow side that arises, because there will be, because we're full-fledged human beings. We have a light side and a shadow side. I have a different, inherently different value system from yours, even though we overlap.
Yeah. And what do you say when people say, hey, opposites attract? Because I always say they might attract, but can they live together in peace?
Yeah, I mean, opposites, I would say this. I would say that if there's something that matches in your value system that you want to learn from that person, and it sort of represents an opposite, great. But if you have stuff in your value system that I don't really care about, and it's an opposite, I'm not going to want to be around you. Exactly. It's not going to make any sense for me to be around you. So it's the opposites within the overlap.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Oh yeah.
Because there's just, I mean, um, you could be out on a date with a person who's absolutely gorgeous to you, and there's where you match. But then all of a sudden they open their mouth up and they're the dumbest person on the planet. They're as dumb as a box of rocks, and that is such a turn off to you that you might not even go past the second date. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah. So there might be, and that is an opposite that you're like, oh God, like you're gorgeous, but you just don't make any sense. You're kind of not intelligent, right? In my perception.
Yeah.
But so sometimes the opposites relates to things that you actually perceiving that you value within them, that they might be able to either teach you or show you something different in.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Maybe I say two people who love politics, right? They have a love for politics. One might be a Democrat, one might be a Republican. Those are opposites. But for our love of politics, we are together because we have crazy discourses and debates within the two-party system that we're debating. But we love politics in general. That's a good example.
Yeah. So how did you even know you could even help people do this or get through their problems?
You know how, I don't know about you, but my careers have sort of built on each other. When I was a young boy, when I was 5 years old, I had the inherent desire to want to know people. And I don't know where that came from. But when I was 5 years old, I would escape my house constantly. Mom, I was like a little Houdini. And I would run across the street in a brand new neighborhood in New Mexico.
Okay.
And I would knock on someone's door and I would say, "Do you have cookies?" I was adorable. Say, "Take me in and feed me cookies." And I would ask them who they were and what they loved and why they did what they did. And I did that. I introduced my mom to like 80% of the neighborhood by the time in a year. And so I had this inherent desire to want to connect to people and get to know them. And I just had this inherent curiosity in it. And so for me, that curiosity has just built on itself through, I did massage for 17 years. I was a trainer at a gym for 5. I was an actor for 10 years, sort of,
Hollywood?
Yeah.
Ah, shit, man.
Did a lot of commercial work, a lot of fun commercial work, and I did some theater and some TV there. And my careers just sort of built on each other. And when I also studied a spiritual path, I meditated deeply for years, contemplated deeply for years. And so by the time I started studying somatic psychotherapy, which is a body psychology, I studied that, and then I met my teacher, John DeMartini, who teaches the perceptual balancing piece, as well as the value systems piece. That it was just like I had mad skills in order to be with you, allow you to develop a very quick trust with me, because I had an inherent curiosity with you. I was asking you about yourself. I'm curious about what makes you tick, right? What makes you drive. So there's an inherent trust that's sort of rapidly built. And then the work can start. And it's quick because it's just because I deeply do care about people and I'm helping them through any struggles that they may have. Because the moment you get through struggles, you watch a person ignite. It's like I've worked with people that were on Skid Row practically, like just down and out and just had no hope, and showed them that they had inherent value and they had inherent, that these amazing value system got them to believe in themselves, and then sort of cleared out as much of the baggage as we possibly could and just watched them take off. And that's the case with any human being. You give any human being your devout attention, genuine attention, and then you ask them the right questions of themselves. Anyone can break through anything.
Yeah.
It goes like this. My teacher says this: the quality of questions that you ask and answer of your life determines the quality of life that you will live.
Bingo.
Right. So you ask brilliant questions of yourself, kind of like you do on the podcast. You learn, you grow, and you get curious about life. You transform.
Yeah. So how long you been doing this?
I've been basically doing it my whole life, but I've been really in the human behaviorist side since 2012.
No. So what do you get couples or singles or a little bit of both?
I do individuals, couples. I work with teenagers. I work with. I also work with CEOs. I do. I can work in several ways. I can work with people. I usually work in 2-hour increments with people. So it's you bring something in and we work on it for 2 hours. That's my individual counseling. Other people, like the CEOs or people who don't have time, I will come in to see on deep dives. So I will come in for a full day of work or a full 2 days of work, and we will just power through 2 or 3 of their goals because they don't have time. So I'll go and I'll fly to their house and work for them for a weekend. And I do work with couples that way and individuals that way as well. And that's one of my favorite ways to work because I can really dive into whatever you're working on and dive into your values around it. It's actually very, very cool. Otherwise, it's I see you on Zoom or you come into my office and we chip away at something until we've met its goal.
Mm.
Mm.
So you don't do any speaking?
I do.
You
I do. I have spoke on many stages, but I also will do workshops where I'll give talks beforehand or the night before, and yeah. So I love talking about various topics or teaching various topics. I'm going to be teaching about a course on the sun soon. And that's coming up in May. Just because I have a love affair with the sun, and I have a different way of looking at it that's pretty fascinating. But yeah, so I'm on a stage that way as well.
So, hey, what do you think about the dating scene today? I know you mentioned the divorce rate and everything briefly, but what do you think about the dating scene today? Or you think, and plus in these COVID times, it's not helping. It's what do you think?
Well, I know it's radically transformed since the advent of the internet. So I mean, you got things like OkCupid and Tinder and all the various sort of websites that people can meet each other on.
Yeah.
And that can actually it's got its pros and cons, obviously.
Yeah.
But the pros that I see in it are that you can quickly get at least a snapshot of an overlap of someone's value system, because that's what you're looking for is common interests. And so if the person's honest about their profile, you can get a quick snapshot of interests. Whereas before the internet, before we had this sort of internet dating thing, you had to go to a bar and then you had to figure out how to talk to that girl, and you had to figure out what you were going to say, and then you had to have this conversation where you got to know her, and a lot of the times, there wasn't much of an overlap. Maybe the overlap was just physical, so you went home together. But on the dating sites, it's a lot. It can be more efficient to find what you like, and then you obviously do a reach out. But there's also not as much rejection on those sites as there is, like, let's say, in a bar. And the downsides are you get catfish. People lie. People are, you can only read so much on a profile.
Yeah.
A date and the person's got a weird squeaky voice that annoys the shit out of you, or they weren't honest about something that you then had an awkward scenario over in the date, so it's mixed. But that's what I see is that and COVID drove home those dating apps even more so.
Oh yeah.
And I think people are, they're wanting to connect. They're wanting to meet someone at least for a night, if not a week, if not a month, maybe a year, maybe 10 years. Who knows?
Yeah, there's pros and cons with everything in life. Just the internet is not the exception. It's if I always say you're only as good as you can only if the I can tell you what to say, what to do, but if you don't have the skills, most of it is just not going to work.
Mhm.
Because even if you were going to a restaurant and I say, hey, when you get to the restaurant, say this, say that. If she says this, you say that. If she said this, you say that. That's not going to work because there's no telling for sure what she's going to say. I can't predict that.
No,
So
that's the excitement of a date.
exactly. But there's a lot of men and women, really, they want the perfect date. Everything has to be just right.
Hmm.
I'm like, no, that's not real life.
And that's the person that's looking for the fantasy. They're
Yeah,
looking for the Disneyland fantasy. And I always say to people, if you're looking for some of the Disneyland fantasy, you aren't going to match up. It doesn't matter if you have a six pack and abs and you're making $1 million or whatever. If a person's in a fantasy, they're literally going to be projecting onto you that fantasy, and you will never match up to it, ever.
yeah,
So run, Forrest, run.
yeah. And I always say, if someone says something that you don't like or it might offend you, hey, don't take it serious. Look, you don't know this person from a can of paint. So it's like you can, y'all go y'all separate ways at the end of the day, end of the date or end of the night. And it's like, ain't no hard feelings. It's like, it's
Well,
okay.
you said it's like an interview. You're exactly right about that. On a date, you're on an interview, and so
Mhm.
and I tell my clients that are looking for love, treat it like a sexy interview.
Yeah.
Ask them all the questions you want to ask them. See how many boxes they check right off the bat, just to make sure that you want to have another date or not. Because my thing is dating is expensive and it's time consuming.
Yeah.
And you want to, I don't mean to be rude by this, but you want to cut off the people that aren't viable right off the bat.
Yeah.
And a lot of people get stuck in this people pleasing thing. Well, oh, I don't want to be mean, so I'll just go on another date with them. Or
No.
maybe, no, I guess, but it's okay, but maybe I'll just go on another date with them. And they know they have no interest in them, but they people please themselves into 2, 3, or 4 dates. And they string a person along who's actually maybe genuinely interested in them,
Yeah.
which then pisses them off towards the end. So I always say on dates, it's an interview, and cut the fish off the line as quickly as possible if there's not a match, or if there's not enough of a match.
Exactly. So if people wanted to work with you, where would they go to?
WillEtheridge.com. And basically, you just reach out to me and grab some time on my calendar for I do free consults to see if I'm appropriate to work with you, and we're an appropriate match. And so I do initial consults. So you come and see me about what's going on with you, and then I would share with you how I would work with it, and then we would see if we would want to work together. Because I'm interviewing you as much as you're interviewing me, right? I might find it's just not a match. Ha!
Exactly. So there you have it. Like, share this episode. All links will be found in the show notes. Tell me what you think. Until next time, we out. Peace.